Hi, thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Jacqueline.
And I'm your host, Nicole. You're listening to the first season of Perfictionist. On this episode, we will be reviewing Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. This book has been divided in the reading community, with some people really enjoying it and others voicing their disappointment. If you are on the fence about spending your time reading Iron Flame, and let me tell you, it will take you some time to get through this 623-page book, we hope this non-spoiler review will help.
Yeah, so Iron Flame picks up immediately following the events of Fourth Wing. Violet must grapple with her feelings, knowing the truth that Navarre's leadership is hiding from its citizens, and the fact that Xandan lied to her for months.
It is a very intense, very action-packed, very information-packed book. So Iron Flame is the second book in the Empyrean series, again, written by Rebecca Yarros. And it's a high fantasy open door romance. And if you're unfamiliar with the term open door, it means that the intimate scenes are described in detail as opposed to them being alluded to. So, given the nature of those steamy scenes, as well as the coarse language found throughout the book, Iron Flame is classified as an adult book.
And I think that makes sense.
Or I guess in some cases it might be like new adult, if you include that category in your categories.
I think it could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
So
could totally see like a 17 or 18-year-old reading this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. As we mentioned previously, there's some criticism surrounding Iron Flame, actually, quite a lot of criticism. One aspect of the book that people are calling out is the writing style. Yeah, I was watching some videos on this, some pretty harsh criticism. So it's a it's very subjective writing style, and so something that's a pet peeve for one person might not be an issue for someone else, or someone might even enjoy it. So while we can agree that, it's not like a masterpiece of literature, like classics like Charles Dickens or, you know,
Yeah.
Jane Austen, I think it's important to recognize that it most likely wasn't trying to be. It's a fantasy book. It's written in the first person perspective. It's for entertainment, and I, for one, was thoroughly entertained. And I think, honestly, personally, that's all that matters. Like, I'm not here to make myself smarter by reading this book.
Yeah, I feel like that's like a common misunderstanding, that people who read books are smart. It's like, no, we just want to be taken to another world. And
Yeah.
yeah, I completely agree. I was very entertained by this book, and that is what I look for personally when I pick up a book, is to be entertained. And
Mhm.
apparently people were saying there's like grammatical errors and stuff, and I didn't notice that. If there were any, it wasn't enough for me to be distracted by them. And I've definitely read books where I'm like, there are so many grammatical or spelling errors that it draws me out of the story. And
Mm.
I didn't notice a single thing, but that could
So
simply be.
I want to touch on this because
Mhm.
I watched a pretty scathing TikTok review on the grammatical errors, and she gave some examples. And I just want to remind this person that we are literally inside of Violet's mind. And if this is how she's thinking, this is how she's thinking. So you can be grammatically correct, but if that's not how the person is thinking, now a spelling error is different, totally
Mhm.
different. Obviously, like that's sort of like a bad mistake that should have been caught.
Yeah.
But the one example this particular person gave, it's Violet's thoughts. And if that's how she's thinking, like she was like, if a ninth grade teacher wouldn't let this pass. I don't know if you saw that video or not.
No, I didn't see that one. Some of them
And
are really long, so I only watched like the first little bit of them.
I was kind of, I want to say offended, but I wasn't like personally offended or anything because it's like obviously not my book.
Yeah.
But I was like pretty irritated because I was like, have you not read this perspective before? Because this perspective means we are inside this person's mind, we're hearing their thoughts, and if this is how they're thinking, then that's how they're thinking. um Grammatical errors used to annoy me in other books. There's like even Sarah J Maas, she has what could be considered a grammatical error when somebody asks a question, but she puts a period at the end instead of a question mark, because she's trying to get across the flatness of their tone, the inflection of the tone. And I think you
Mm-hmm.
have to remember that creative writing is that it's creative. Okay. And it can't always be grammatically perfect necessarily if the artist or the writer is trying to convey something in a particular way.
No, I love that you mentioned that because sometimes they're not actually errors. They're done intentionally to make a point about
Mm-hmm.
how the sentence should be read. And that is very important to acknowledge.
I think
And
I think people are nitpicking.
mm-hmm, well, yeah, and we kind of in our spoilers review talked about reasons perhaps why people are being a bit more critical.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it would have passed in a ninth grade class coming from someone who does teach. I think
Thank you.
it would probably be um, very well received if a ninth grader wrote anything of this caliber. Let me tell you, they're not where you think they are if you think they can write better than this. But
Oh
that
my
aside.
gosh. I'm sorry. I was just I was so affronted by that. I was like just like, okay, if it was written in like the third person perspective and then you've got like these grammatical yes. Okay, yeah, there's this, that's maybe not the best. But it's not. It's first
No.
person. Like, is it present tense? Let me just quickly check. It's even in present tense. So it's first person present tense. So it I just feel like if you haven't read that much in first person present tense, it definitely takes some adjustment. It can be uncomfortable to read this perspective if you're not used to it. When I first
Mm-hmm.
started reading first person present tense, I did not like it. It evokes like a lot more tension. It can feel clunky at times, and that's just how reading this perspective is.
It just like reminds me of when you read books where they write in people's accents. And so like words are spelt wrong and
Yeah.
but it's like so you are reading the words how the person is saying them because different people have either different accents or different
Hmm.
I don't know, just the way they pronounce words is different. So they want you
Mhm.
as the reader to pronounce it the way the character would pronounce it. So
A
it's
very,
intentionally
very
spelt wrong.
a very well-known example of this is Hagrid and Harry Potter, right?
As Jacqueline mentioned previously, this book is written from first person's perspective, and that is from Violet's perspective. Throughout the course of the book, she's really struggling with like her personal relationships, and she's navigating some like serious ethical dilemmas. Like I kept thinking of like different ethical like there's like sometimes scenarios that you have to go through like I took a few ethics classes and there's like the classic like train cart and it's like there's like a group of people on one side and one person on the other and it's like going
Yeah.
towards the group and do you switch it to go to the one but it's like you have actively decided to take this
Kill
one
somebody.
person to save the
Yeah.
group and it's like I'm like I feel like this is Violet's world right now like she's constantly having to make choices and
Mhm.
she's constantly feeling as though she's making the wrong decision. And
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people online like really unhappy with Violet's character growth. And I personally didn't mind it. Like I felt like the struggles she was going through and her reactions to those struggles seemed really valid to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
I agree. I thought they were very valid, and also she's what I'm really enjoying about Violet is that we are finding out she's very imperfect and
mhm.
she's very human and she is making big mistakes, but it's understandable. And I mean, she's only a cadet still.
Yeah.
She's not like swooping in and like saving everybody. Like, yeah, I think we'll get there probably. I think we're going to get
Mhm.
there, but like you said, we're only in the second book of a 6-book series. We're probably going to see some pretty intense character growth by the time we get to the end.
Yeah, and I think we do see it in this book. The thing she's able to do in this book is more in a lot of ways than what she was able to do in Fourth Wing. So she is progressing in many aspects of her
Hmm.
personality and her abilities.
Hmm.
I a TikTok I saw about somebody complaining was they were saying that because she's kind of being set up as the chosen one, even though she's in her early 20s, she needs to kind of like buck up and be more mature and be better. And I'm like, she didn't choose this life. This life was thrust upon her. So why the heck should she have to be like, oh, I guess I'm chosen, so therefore I must now be perfect? Like, no, that's not reality. Like, I know this is a fantasy. It is not reality. I get that. But like, that's not how people react. Like, yes, when you're given a hardship, people like step up to the plate and get it done kind of thing. But at the same time, it's not easy. It's not just, oh, I need to be perfect. I need to be able to do everything, and I need to be able to do it now, and I need to be able to do it in the best way possible. No, she needs to grow. Like, that would be absurd to expect her to just all of a sudden
And it
be
would be
able to,
boring to read about.
and it would be boring. So she's struggling. This is her struggle book. And I think without that, it would seem unrealistic, feels like the wrong word considering it's a fantasy book, but it would feel unnatural for her all of a sudden to just be good at everything.
For an adult book especially, I feel like it'd be very eye roll inducing if it was like that.
Hmm.
Like, oh, come on. Like, this way we can struggle, or, well, not struggle with her, but struggle alongside her, read alongside her struggles. I don't even know how to say that.
Yeah.
But, and then have a lot of like respect for how she has grown by the time she gets to that. If she's just like, oh, I'm perfect and mature, like right from the get go, like, who are
Yeah.
these people saying these things? Like, my
I don't know. I
goodness.
feel like that character's so annoying.
Yeah.
Be like, you're so unrelatable. But like, she's in a world that has been like, her world has been shattered. Everything she thought she knew has just been turned on its head, and she's just desperately trying to figure out how to put the pieces back, because she
Hmm.
knows they can't go back the way they were. So it's not only is
Nope.
she trying to put the pieces back, she's trying to put them back in a better way, and she doesn't have a map for this. Like, she
And I
doesn't have
also want
the
to say,
answers.
like, she she expected a quiet life as a scribe, not like this, whatever this
Hmm.
is. Like, this is insane compared to the life she expected. So,
Yeah.
like, yes, she's screwed up and she's made some mistakes, but she's, in my opinion, she's killing it.
Yeah. And we've
Considering.
considering she's not being killed, but like, it's been a year and a half. Like, the entirety of these two books put together has been a year and a half. Like, how much have you changed in a year and a half?
Yeah, I don't know that. Mm, mm-mm, mm-mm.
Mm-mm. Oh.
I almost can't watch the TikToks on this book anymore because I find them to be a little outrageous and ridiculous.
Mhm. So if you are on the fence about reading this book, then don't be persuaded by some of these more outlandish reviews, because some of them are kind of sensationalized. And
It's definitely better to make that decision for yourself at the end of the book, whether you agree or not. And it's unfortunate that if you have seen these TikToks, if it taints your perspective, because
mhm.
oh yeah, aw, geez, I'm sorry for whoever's perspective gets tainted by these angry TikToks.
Yeah, I know, because it's like a story that you might have otherwise really enjoyed. Now you have these like kind of thoughts swirling around your head. So then you're going to be hyper focused on seeing those things.
Mm-hmm.
But
That's too bad.
yeah,
But you
it's.
know what? I think that's comes in the territory of something becoming ultra trendy and famous. There's always going to be
Mhm.
haters. There's going to be some pretty loud haters, and that's exactly what this has. And you can make of that what you wish, but I mean, it's trendy and popular for a reason. So keep that
Mhm.
in mind as well.
Yes.
This book is written in first person present tense. So, given that, we are limited to what Violet can see and observe. So, if, coming from a different perspective, which the story is not written in, but if it was written in third person perspective, we might get a lot more insight to character development for some of the supporting characters. Given that we are seeing this through the veil of Violet's eyes, it might seem like there's less. We can only know what she is experiencing or interacting with. But given that limited perspective or point of view, I think we have gotten some pretty good character development. Lilith's arc was intense and somewhat unexpected. Dane, we have seen his character development with what little interaction Violet has allowed him to have with
Mhm.
her. Xandan is just a big old cluster F at this point. But yeah, like that's just a big mess. But I think that given our limited view, we are getting some pretty good character development, in my opinion.
I enjoy all of the side characters, and I love that we are introduced to new characters as well. And I think that adds some depth to the story as well as some drama that was really interesting to read about. So I am also really happy with where the other characters are at. I think there has been, again, some criticism that those side characters are not getting any development. And I agree with you. I think you need to keep in mind we only can get the amount of development that we would get through one person's perspective, which is going to
Hmm.
be limiting. But I love every interaction she has with all the characters around her. They are all super unique, and I feel like I know their personalities and who they are, and I just get a
Hmm.
chuckle out of some of the things that are said by said side characters.
All right, so we're gonna talk about the themes of this story as we try to do with our non-spoiler episode, and we're gonna do the best we can without giving anything away. So I'm gonna be as vague as possible. So obviously, there's a war theme. Gonna leave it at that. There's good versus evil. It's pretty obvious, I think, if you've read Fourth Wing, which I'm assuming you have at this point. There's the issue of trust. That's a very prominent theme in this book. These kind of became apparent at the end of Fourth Wing that Violet was going to have to work through these issues, and that continues, and perhaps we could even say, without spoiling, intensifies for
Mhm.
reasons you'll have to read to find out. And also, the theme of cultural identity is introduced into this book, and it is really interesting to learn more about Navarrian and the Poromish cultures, specifically what sets them apart.
I really, really enjoyed that aspect of the book and all the different, like the progression in the cultures that we get. But also keeping in mind, it is a first person book. So it's just from Violet's perspective. But I was thoroughly enthralled with every bit of information that we received.
I felt like we receive a lot of information in this book.
A lot, I would agree. It is almost an overwhelming amount of information, but it's like each aspect of the book, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you put it all together, it's like it's information overload
Yeah,
in
that's
a
how I
good way.
felt. In a good way, yeah.
Mhm. Though the world building is yet another aspect that people tend to criticize online. And I personally enjoyed the world building that was given. A lot of it is linked to like themes of cultural identity, as Jacqueline just touched on, but it goes like way beyond that. Readers will also learn more about like the dragons as well as the venom, and we even are introduced to a new form of band magic. I really, really liked this
Hmm.
bit. And I think it's important to understand that this is the second book. We've pressed on this point a couple of times already, but there might be some legitimate reasons why certain information isn't being presented. So I think as readers, we might need to be a little patient when it comes to this series because I want to know all the answers right now. And it's easy to be like, tell me why this is happening. But I think
Hmm.
that we will be pleasantly surprised if we are all patient and wait for the information to come when Rebecca deems it necessary for us to have it.
I do believe that because we are in first person present tense perspective, viewing it from Violet's perspective, someone who has grown up in a very sort of small, with a small worldview, I feel at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, like regarding information about the rest of the continent and why we haven't received that yet is because Violet isn't there yet. So once Rebecca deems it necessary for us to have more information about the broader continent, that is also when Violet is going to be learning that information as well. Not just, we don't want to hear Violet regurgitating information she's learned in her books, in her scribe training. That would be boring. I think it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
a lot more interesting learning about it from the first person perspective when she's experiencing it herself.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, there is a way in which we could have learned information, but would have just been us being told all this information. And time again, we hear like we would rather see information than just be told the information. So I think that it
Exactly.
makes way more sense to wait so we can
Agreed.
experience it.
Yes, I agree. So regarding the plot structure, this book is a journey. So
Yes, it
the
is.
whole book, yes, it is. It is 623 pages and it only covers a few months. So when you think about the timeline and how large the book is, there's a lot happening regarding the plot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot.
No, a lot. We get taken places,
Yeah.
and it's fun.
it can be fun and it can be intensely frustrating, but like in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think a journey is exactly what this book takes you on in more than one way. But we shall leave it at that. And emotionally, along with this journey brings a lot of emotions as you're reading it. I feel like there's a little bit of everything in this book, and it just brings out the feels. Like, I was definitely amused by the book. Like, overall, I was very amused. There were parts where I was appalled, like absolutely frustrated beyond belief about some of the
Hmm.
things that people were doing to other people, like just appalled. And at times incredibly frustrated. There are moments where you are just like ripping your hair out, like, why does this keep happening? Or what is going on? But in the end, I was just left like flabbergasted. Like, you're like, I'm sorry, what? Like, so many questions, so many like shocking moments, like right near the end. And it's not just the very end. You get some pretty incredible like twists and like pretty momentous moments all happening in the last, like, I don't know, 5-10 chapters. And
Hmm.
I'm just really, really intrigued to find out what happens next, because we are left on a little bit of a cliff, hanging off.
Just a little bit, like if you were like hanging off the cliff by your fingernail.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I felt throughout this book, there was moments of like, yes. And then there were moments of like, oh no. And then there were moments of like, and then moments of like, what? Sorry, this is terrible. Terrible
No,
description.
those are perfect descriptions. All those sounds were sounds that I've made while reading this book. I felt like I was right back there.
And then moments of like, how dare he? No, I'm kidding. But not really.
There was definitely a moment where I said, how dare he? I was just
Oh yeah.
like, the moment where I was appalled, I'm thinking of this one particular moment where this one
Mm.
nasty person has
Mm-hmm.
the audacity to
Mm.
do something that is just, I mean, of all the things he'd already done, and
Mm.
I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It just really
Jeez.
upsets me.
Yeah. And then there were moments of like me going like, for bleep's sake, like, are we serious? Is this seriously happening right now?
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a moment where I wanted to throw the book across the room. And I have never come across that in like where I
Oh,
like
really?
physically was like, "Ugh!" Yeah. Like
Put it down gently.
I feel like though that that's a sign of good storytelling because it's making you
Mhm,
feel things, like intense things. Books that don't make me feel anything, I don't talk about and I'm not interested in rereading. You know, books that
mhm.
make me feel things, I want to read again. So, you know, take that how you will.
Overall impressions on the story is I personally really enjoyed Iron Flame. I really liked the world that Rebecca has created, and I'm excited to know where the story goes next. If you liked Fourth Wing but are still having like second thoughts about whether or not you'll like Iron Flame because of maybe some of the TikToks you've watched or just reading the description, it hasn't piqued your interest, I would suggest maybe trying the audiobook. Like it is a really dense book. So I always find like with books where I'm like interested in reading them, but I'm not sure I want to like commit to the physical read. I always try
Mhm.
and go for the audiobook because then I
Mhm.
get the information, but it's a little bit uh, easier to absorb. So that would
Yeah,
be my suggestion.
I think that's a great
And
suggestion.
thank you. Because, like, even if you don't like Iron Flame, like maybe there's some aspect of this particular book you don't like, it doesn't mean you
Mhm.
won't enjoy like the overall series. Like, there's so much story
Mhm.
left to be told. So it's like,
Mhm.
regardless of how you feel about this book, get the information from it so you can like enjoy the rest of the series. Because, like, I have high hopes that this is going to be an incredible series overall.
I 100% agree with what you said. And I think, as I've mentioned before, I believe that this book is just setting up for the overall series plot to move forward.
Hmm.
Um, that made it sound boring. It's not. There's nothing boring about this book, and it's very fast paced. So, if you enjoyed Fourth Wing, I would definitely suggest that you give Iron Flame a try. And like Nikki said, as an audiobook, if you're not sure if you want to commit to the physical read, because I think that's absolutely fabulous suggestion.
So at the end, we like to try and recommend some books that we think you would enjoy if you enjoy the book we're talking about. And being newer to adult fantasy, I wasn't aware of anything like similar, but I did look up books like when you finish reading Iron Flame, what should you read next? Because I was curious for myself, like what I really enjoyed this, what should I kind of look into reading next? And there were a couple books that I noticed were already on my like want to read list sort of thing. And I thought that was interesting that I'd already kind of flagged these books as something I'm interested in reading in the future. And they were also recommended as something that if you like Iron Flame, you would like them. The first one is called Priority of an Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, and it centers around three powerful women in a world that has magic and dragons. So, if you really like the magical element and the dragons and kind of like the female empowerment, then I think that Priority of an Orange Tree kind of sounds like it fits those that bill. And the second one is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Yarros. And this one seems quite different in a lot of ways because it's about two rival journalists and it's set amongst the backdrop of warring gods. So I'm thinking they must have similar vibes because the actual descriptions of them seem very different. But this is a book that I've had kind of come up several times on like my social media of like books that like recommended basically for me to read based on other things I've read. I just thought it was interesting. It also came up as a recommendation for if you liked Iron Flame. So it sounds very
Hmm.
different, but I'm thinking they might have similar vibes. So those are two that I definitely will be checking out in the future.
Wonderful. Yeah, they sound really interesting. Well, I think that's all we have for you today. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you soon. Bye for now.
Happy reading.